We're looking at figure 11.5 on page 221 of your textbook. So let's start by drawing just the marginal abatement cost curve for this firm. I'm going to call the vertical axis my cost curve, little 0 at the origin, and the horizontal axis I'm calling emissions. And then my marginal abatement cost curve looks the same as it does always. Now let's assume the efficient level of emissions is over here. Now I'm not going to draw the marginal damage curve, but let's say an environmentalist or someone told us that this E star is the efficient level of emissions. So we aim to reduce emissions from E max to E star. That's what we want to do. E max is the amount of emissions we will emit if there's no cost in emitting, meaning there's no policy that forces the firm to reduce emissions. Right, and in this case we look at enforcement. So we are going to force the company to get to E star. We can do it, for example, with a penalty curve. Now instead of the marginal damage curve, I'm going to draw a penalty curve. The penalty curve looks something like, let's make it something like this. So we call this the marginal penalty curve. So if I emit at E max, the maximum amount, then I don't pay any marginal abatement cost, but I pay a really high penalty or fine. So the cost of the fine is really high. Therefore, there's an incentive for me to reduce emissions. So let's say I reduce emissions to E2 over here. Let me just take away some of this. Then my marginal abatement cost is, there are some, it's very low. Let's make it C1. But again, my penalty for not being at E star is still very high. So C2. So there's still an incentive for me to further reduce my emissions. So let's say I get to E1 over here. E1. So I just reduced it from E2 to E1. Now the penalty I pay is C, let's call it star, and the abatement I pay is also E star. So I'm kind of at the place that I don't want to reduce any further, because going to the left of this point would mean that I pay more in marginal abatement cost than my penalty. So I'd rather just pay this penalty and not decrease it further, because then my marginal abatement cost is more than my penalty. Okay, so I'm always going to have people that do not comply with this policy. I'm always going to have people at E1 while I really want them to emit or abate until E star. But they're going to stop at E1, because if they go further than E1, if they want to abate from E1 to E star, then it will actually cost them more to abate than the penalty they pay. So they're not going to do it. So what we want is the marginal penalty curve to actually look something more like this. We want it to be so high that you are forced to go to the efficient level as decided by the central authorities. If I'm at E1, then let's say I'm currently busy with marginal penalty 2, so I'm over there, and I'm currently emitting at E1, then my penalty will still be higher than my marginal abatement cost. And I can reduce even further until my penalty is equal to my marginal abatement cost. So that's just something to keep to think about. This is a very important graph. You could get it in an exam, so make sure you're able to draw it, and very importantly, make sure you understand it and you're able to discuss it as well.